out of the way, let's talk about the simplest type of chord progressions we can build with that, which are cadences. Can somebody tell me what a cadence is? What is a cadence?
It is the ending to a phrase?
Yes, yes, it is the ending to a phrase. It is the goal of the phrase. And a phrase is the smallest complete musical thought. And if we compare a musical phrase to a sentence in grammar, then a phrase is like a sentence, and a cadence is like the punctuation to the sentence. So we're going to talk about musical punctuations now. Cadences, you guys know, take the form of two chords, and we're going to start with the authentic cadence and the two subcategories of authentic cadences. Yikes. All right, yeah, we have the perfect authentic cadence and the imperfect authentic cadence. What are the conditions for the perfect authentic cadence, guys?
Soprano has to end on scale degree 1.
Yeah, soprano has to be on scale degree 1 in the one chord, and then what else?
5 in the bottom?
Well, okay, so what are the chords? We have 5 to 1, right? All right, 1 has to be in the soprano. Scale degree 1 has to be in the soprano of 1. But what do both chords have to be in order for this to be a perfect authentic cadence?
In root position.
Yes, both have to be in root position. By the way, both chords have to be complete as well. Complete. Imperfect authentic cadence, obviously, if you're not meeting these all of these conditions, then you have a perfect authentic cadence. If you're going from 5/6 to 1, well, 5/6 is an inversion, so it's not a perfect authentic cadence. If you end up on scale degree 3 or scale degree 5 in the soprano of the 1 chord, then you don't have a perfect authentic cadence. So we're pretty clear on that. All right, let's talk about plagal cadences, also called the amen cadence. What chords are involved?
4 and 1.
4 and 1, yes. 4 and 1, and in minor also 4 and 1. Something to note, that 4 to 1 can also happen in the body of the piece. It could happen outside of a cadence, and it may seem like it's an omission, it's missing the 5 chord, but composers went from 4 to 1 all the time outside of a cadence within the body of the piece. So it's okay for you to go from 4 to 1 without having 5 in between, just an FYI. So plagal cadence is a cadence, but it's also a motion within the composition itself. Okay. But when it happens as a cadence, when 4 to 1 happens as a cadence, it has to be preceded by another type of cadence. What type of cadence has to precede the plagal cadence? It's more of an addendum cadence. It wouldn't happen until you have a perfect authentic cadence. So plagal cadences would, if you think about church music, you think about, oh, I'm singing, I'm reaching the end, amen. So it happens after you get a perfect authentic cadence, and then it's added at the end as an addendum. All right. So when you use it as a cadence, it needs to be preceded by a perfect authentic cadence. All right. But 4 to 1 can happen in the body of a piece as well, without any 5 to 1 preparations. Any questions about that? Let's go to deceptive, and we're going to talk about voice leading. We're going to jump the gun and talk a little voice leading issues with deceptive cadences, because if you are not careful, you will commit parallelisms in deceptive cadences or deceptive motions. Okay. All right. So what are the Roman numerals for deceptive cadence?
5/6.
5 to 6, yeah. 5 to 6, and in minor, 5 to 6. Way more dramatic in minor. All right. Okay. Now, deceptive cadences can happen in the body of a piece, not as cadences, but as motions. When it happens in the body of a piece, it's called a deceptive motion. And in order to avoid parallelisms in a deceptive motion, when 5 goes to 6, there are certain tricks you can do to avoid parallel fifths and octaves. By the way, did we talk about why we have to avoid parallel fifths and octaves? Did I mention that at all?
No.
No. Okay. Does anyone know the answer? Why is it so bad to have to preserve a perfect fifth or perfect octave from one chord to another? Anyone remember from theory 1? Why is it so bad in this style of composition? Okay. So what's the name of our tuning system? Anyone know the name of our tuning system, which, by the way, was invented in the mid-Baroque period? It kind of started the common practice period.
Temperament, like equal temperament?
Equal temperament. Now, in equal temperament, what are the 2 most homogeneous intervals? What are the intervals that, when played, if you're not listening carefully, it sounds like you're playing one note? they're intervals where the two notes blend so well together. If you're not listening carefully, you mistake it for listening to one note.
1 and
I'm gonna
3.
do 7.
No, the seventh,
Octave?
the octave definitely. Octave is the only natural, it's the only pure interval in our tuning system. All right, it's part of natural tuning. The octave, the notes in an octave blend so well together that if you're not listening carefully, it sounds like you're playing one note. So that's our first homogeneous interval. And the second most homogeneous interval is the perfect fifth. Now, the perfect fifth is not the same thing as a pure fifth from natural tuning. A pure fifth in natural tuning, the notes blend so well together that it sounds like one note, whereas the notes, the perfect fifth is almost as homogeneous as a pure fifth. All right. But in our tuning system, there's a little bit of the pure fifth, perfect fifth is out of tune with nature, so there's a little bit of more rub in the perfect fifth. But in the context of our tuning system, it's the second interval where the two notes blend the best together. And so if you're not listening carefully, you could mistake a perfect fifth for being one note. And so when you preserve a perfect fifth or an octave from one chord to the other, it sounds like you're dropping a voice in the texture. And so part of the aesthetic of chorales, of Baroque chorales, is to have a full-bodied, thick chords happening throughout the composition. And if you have too many parallelisms of those type of intervals, of our homogeneous intervals, it sounds like you're dropping a voice in the texture, and it sounds awkward. It doesn't sound as full as it can. And so that's why we avoid parallel fifths and octaves. And so there is a trick to help you avoid parallel fifths and octaves in deceptive motions in the body of the piece. Now, here's the thing. You don't want to use these tricks if you actually want a deceptive cadence. Because if you actually want a deceptive cadence, all cadences, whether at the end of the phrase or at the end of the composition, you want both chords to be complete chords. You don't want them to be missing any chord tones. But in the body of the piece, to preserve the forward motion and to preserve the texture of the composition in the body, we need to avoid parallelisms when we can within the body of the piece, and we have to do some make some omissions and do some finaglings to make sure that we don't get parallelisms between 5 and 6. All right, let's resolve this with the smoothest voice leading we can, which will lead us into parallel octaves. So I did the smoothest voice leading that I could to resolve 5 to 6, but this quote-unquote common sense voice leading led me to commit parallel octaves. Where are the parallelisms here? Between what voices?
Bass and alto.
Bass and alto, yeah. And so to avoid this parallelism, said that when you're using 5 to 6 within the body of the piece, when you're able to omit notes from a chord and it'd be okay because you don't need a full-bodied chord, you're not at a cadence, you want to double the third in the 6th chord to avoid parallelisms. And this is what happens when we do that. All right. Our leading tone is in this soprano, so that's the first thing that I'm going to do is resolve the leading tone, T to do here. But now I need to double that third of the chord being C. Now we already have C in the soprano. We're going to double that. I think the smoothest place to double that would be in the tenor voice. So you see, in doubling the third, which is C in this chord, we've avoided that parallel octave.
It ends in 5.
Yeah, anything going to 5. Anything going to 5, you have a half cadence. All right. Now, there's a special subset of half cadences. It's a type of half cadence that can only happen in minor keys where you have to also resolve in a particular way to not get parallel fifths or octaves. And that's the Phrygian cadence. It's a very popular motion or cadence in Baroque music. That do te le sol in the bass, that ends in that progression ends in the Phrygian cadence, and it's used so much in Baroque laments and in other music in the Baroque period. All right. So anyone know the Roman numerals for Phrygian cadence?
It's 4-6-5.
Yes, 4-6-2-5. Okay. Now, to avoid parallelisms in a Phrygian cadence, does anyone know the special voice leading trick? The tricks are the following. 1, double the third in the 4-6 chord. So in 4-6, you're basically doubling the bass note because it's in first inversion and the third is in the bass. Double the third or bass note. All right. And then a surefire way to avoid those parallelisms. The doubled third must leap down a diminished fifth. Awkward to sing, but solves the problem of keeping the 4-part texture. Now, with this happening, voice crossing may occur in your progression, but in this case, voice crossing can occur so long as you shake out of it when you move beyond that progression. So you can have voice crossing momentarily between 2 chords if you shake out of it in the following chords, and all your, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, everything is in order. After that, you are fine. All right, let's voice this thing. Where shall we double that third? Where shall it be good? All right. Let's have the bass in the tenor. Oh gosh, I didn't leave myself any space whatsoever here. All right, I doubled my bass note in the alto voice. Now I have to leap down a diminished fifth from here. All right, what's a diminished fifth down from A flat, guys? I got to leap down a diminished fifth with this voice. Again, this is the trick. Part of the trick, we double the third in the 4/6 chord, and now we have to leap down a diminished fifth in that doubled third. Diminished fifth below A flat?
D
Close.
flat. D flat.
Just D. Just D. What happens in the key? And so here is where we leap down diminished fifth. I'm going to bring this up to a G. There's where our voice crossing occurs. Since we have F in the tenor, I'm just going to bring it up a step and bring it up to G. So the alto in this case dips below the tenor. That's where voice crossing occurs, but it helps us to preserve 2 full-bodied chords. And here, our leading tone. Okay? So the trick, guys, to avoid parallelisms in a Phrygian cadence, double the bass in the 4/6 chord, and then in that doubled bass note, or the third of the chord, leap down a diminished fifth from there, and then have smooth voice leading in the other remaining chord tones, and you will avoid parallelisms. Okay, any questions about the Phrygian cadence?
I'm good.
Okay, cool beans. Here we go. Okay, let's see. Okay, so you guys know about the optimal voicing for chords. You can have, you want more space towards the bottom of a chord than the top of the chord. Can you have more than an octave between bass and tenor?
Can I what? Sorry, what was the question?
When voicing a chord in this 4-part chorale style, can you have an octave between the bass and the tenor?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Can you have more than an octave between the tenor and the alto?
No.
No. Alto, soprano? No.
No.
So you cannot between adjacent voices except for tenor and bass. Okay, let's talk about harmonic rhythm for a second. And something that I address in your homework is that chorales are low-level polyphonic compositions. Even though they're homorhythmic, all the voices are more or less moving at the same time. You still have to preserve the independence of each individual quote-unquote voice in the composition. So it's a very low-level polyphony, but it is polyphony.